Hello and welcome to another video by Draw with Lee. Today we are going to do another portrait using charcoal. Subject matter today is my dog Cosmo in profile view. As always, we will start with a block-in. And the easiest way to do that is using our hardest charcoal pencil that you have. In my case, we have a HB pencil, and I'm going to make sure that his face fits within the canvas of the paper. So let's start with a block-in and the shapes to ensure that he fits nicely within portions of the paper we have here. Now it's easy to exceed the boundaries of the paper that we have, so as we kind of figure out how to place his head on this paper, I think I started a little too big, so the way to do those repairs is to shrink the block-in of the overall shape to make sure he fits properly. Now you've seen that I've really reduced the size of the initial block-in to make sure his ears fit within the composition. I'm not too concerned yet about where the placement of the eyes, nose, ears, and tongue, mouth are yet. We will get there, but wanted to make sure that in general, as we start drawing, everything fits within the frame. From here, I think we can start to measure the individual elements of the drawing to make sure that everything is placed correctly, all the major features of the face are placed correctly for anatomical accuracy. You'll see I'll be using these measurement lines while I'm trying to understand where the various parts of his head are. Some of the larger measurements that I have are where is the eye in relation to the entry points of the ear, where the eye is relative to kind of the beginning of the mouth. We can use a technique that is called triangulation to find the main points where things intersect, and that is how we ensure that the proportions are accurate and making sure that we're not too far off as we refine the drawing. And as we go along and refine the lines, you'll see that it becomes more and more like the subject matter that we are drawing from. And you can see all the kind of measuring lines that I have in place. Make sure that when you measure and place those lines down, that they are not too dark so it's easy to erase. And as you go, you'll see you make mistakes, but it's easy enough to correct because the general shapes are in the right place. sometimes it helps to stand back and look at the drawing and make sure that it still looks right. Looking at this more closely, I noticed that the tongue looks like it's a little bit too close to the eye. So I remeasured that line from the eye to where the tongue is, and it looks like I need to push it forward a bit more. At this stage in the drawing, there is not enough detail yet where it prevents me from doing so. So I will continue measuring and adjusting until I'm happy with the overall block-in and layout. At this point, I'm feeling pretty good about the overall block-in proportions. From here, we will spend a bit of time refining the lines, making sure that the major features are well defined before we start shading. Okay, I feel pretty good about where the composition and proportions are with this drawing now. As you saw, I made a lot of adjustments as we went along the way, especially in relation to kind of the size of the mouth and the position of the ears. Where I originally laid out the components of this drawing, they were not as accurate as they could have been, and that resulted in some pushing and pulling of different elements, larger or smaller, to more closely align with the photo that we're drawing from today. One sanity check I can do when it comes to the proportions is looking at kind of the placement of the eye relative to the depth of top and left and right portions of the drawing. So for instance, if I try to measure from like the top of the eyeball to the bottom of the mouth, that is almost the distance between the top of the eyeball and the top of the ear. So I can use my pencil to look at that, and it's fairly close. There's a little bit of extra space on top, which is accurate if you look at the distance between the top of the eyeball to the bottom of the chin, top of the eyeball to the top of the ear. There's a little bit of segment left over which matches perfectly. So I'm happy with that. The part that might be wrong here is if I look at, say, like the left part of the eyeball to the end of the nose. That distance, when you double that up, ends up being around the end of the neck. That distance looks like it could be about a little bit beyond the beginning of the back of the ear. So if I measure that distance, that actually looks like it should start from around there, which means that either this nose is too long or my ears are not far back enough. And it looks like the nose may be actually a little bit too long here. So I might have messed up with the measurement of how long the nose is. So we'll fix that now. So I can do the inverse. Measure distance between the back of the ear to the beginning of the eyes. Double that. That's really where the nose should really end. So my previous placement of the nose seems actually to have been a little bit more accurate in that regard. So at this point in the drawing, we'll make those corrections, make sure we fix those inaccurate measurements, and then everything has to shift accordingly. Now, unfortunately, I've kind of made it too dark here already, so I'm gonna come in here with the kind of hard eraser and try to erase out the inaccurate drawing. I think part of the reason why I extended the nose so out is because I made the eyeball too big. So we'll make some adjustments to fix that. So also notice as we measure that the neck goes down like further to the left here than what was previously drawn. So making a lot of corresponding proportional adjustments accordingly. Now if I measure from front of the nose, back of the eyes, post adjustment, it's a lot more reasonable, a lot closer to what it is in the drawing. Again, bottom of the mouth to bottom of the mouth to the middle of the eyeball. And we got some space left in a way that makes sense, or top of the eyeball, bottom mouth. Top of the eyeball, close to the top of the head. Pretty close. Now, as I drew this, you basically saw me make every single mistake possible when laying out the proportions of a drawing. And I actually went way too dark with some of these lines, confident that they were accurate. And now I have some residual damage from that on the paper that is hard to correct. But that's okay, we learn from those processes. By doing this over and over again and making these mistakes, we learn to be more refined in how we lay down the proportions. As we apply value, you can see that we use different cross-hatching techniques and different softness of pencils to bring out some of the highlights and push back shadows where the different values are really what allow this drawing to pop. We have a pretty nice base layer of shadow now. Now, there's some roughness around parts of the drawing that we don't want to emphasize. There's some roughness just based on quickness of how we're putting in the shadows, but now going forwards, we want to refine, push and pull the different values, making sure that there's accuracy around kind of the shapes where the shadow meets the cast shadow. We want to make sure that we're pushing and pulling the shadow areas around the shapes so that it provides more pop and realism as we draw. As you shade this drawing, you'll realize that in some ways the values, at least within the same color parts of his face, are actually very similar. So you want to work on kind of the subtleties of where parts of the fur is actually darker or lighter, and fill in the gaps as well, because that can actually come across as being quite jarring. You want to make sure that the flow of the fur is generally the correct direction and values to get the best results. Or you make mistakes, or you put too much value in certain areas, use your kneaded eraser to bring back some of the highlights. You want to finesse this drawing. Now, if I'm being honest with myself, looking at this compared to the source photo, I can tell that the proportions are still not quite right. It looks like the face is way too tall relative to the width. So I'm going to continue making adjustments, even though at this point, ideally, the shading shouldn't have happened before I was happy with the proportions. But sometimes you realize these mistakes after the fact and need to make adjustments accordingly. Okay, now I am much happier with the proportions. They're probably not perfect, but they're very close now, and gets the essence of Cosmo's face pretty clearly. For the remainder of this drawing, I will focus on getting the values into a more finished state, then we'll wrap it up. And there we have it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give me a like or subscribe for future videos. I'll be continuing to create more video tutorials of various subjects, pets, maybe some celebrity portraits in the near future. Please leave me a comment if you have any questions, and I look forward to you coming back for the next one. Take care.